largest Ferrari contract in team history, but Ferrari have been battling George Russell.
Feel anything? No.
Does anybody else think that Formula One feels kind of different in 2026? And I'm not just talking about the engine regulations and all the obvious things. I'm talking about the fact that the sport kind of just feels like a different sport. It just doesn't feel the same. And it's not necessarily good or bad. It just feels different. I was compiling some statistics, putting together a new video for this year's first couple of races. It's good to be back, by the way. And I couldn't help but notice that there wasn't really anything in the numbers or in the data that could explain the way that I'm feeling about the way that Formula One feels. So I thought about it for a little while, and I think I've come up with some theories. I've put together 3 things which I think are part of the reason why Formula One doesn't quite feel the same. And I'll talk about some solutions about how I think we can get this sport to feel the way that it felt to us last year and get some of that magic back that we had in 2025. So first and foremost, I think that last year's stories fell flat. 2025 was one of the most storied years in Formula One that I can remember in essentially the entire time that I've been watching. The story of 2025 really began in 2023 with Max Verstappen's incredibly dominant performance. And from that year came the first question, which we would carry through all the way up until last year. And that question was, can anybody beat Max Verstappen? Can anybody beat Red Bull? Is Max Verstappen an insurmountable force, or is anybody able to get ahead? And then 2024 started to answer that question, and it was, of course, Lando Norris. 2024's story was about Max Verstappen coming out of a period of absolute domination, McLaren catching up on a mechanical side and giving Lando Norris the car to be able to fight against Max Verstappen. So we were starting to get a resolution of this question of can anybody beat Max? But then Lando had a lot of bottles. Lando had a really rough second half of that season. McLaren in that year of 2024 had so many cases where they fell short, either strategically, Lando made poor decisions. This was the first time that we saw team orders between the two drivers. And so the question, which, from 2024 was, can anybody beat Max Verstappen, sort of evolved into, does Lando Norris have what it takes to beat Max Verstappen? And that became the new story. That became the new question. We'd kind of evolved. We had this evolution from Max as the insurmountable, unbeatable force, Lando as kind of this challenger, then questions about whether our challenger was a worthy challenger or not. Going into 2025, these questions became even larger because now McLaren had clearly the best car. But with Oscar Piastri being such a formidable driver in the first part of 2025, the question around whether Lando Norris was actually the worthy champion became even louder. Papaya rules became a big question, and papaya rules again were further questions about who deserves to be at the front. And then halfway through the season, the story changed again because Max Verstappen started picking up wins regularly. He was on the podium all the time. And that meant that for the first time, he started closing that gap up back to Lando and back to Oscar. And now suddenly we looked like we were going to have a resolution to the question of, is Lando a worthy champion? We thought perhaps the resolution would be no. And that Max, who no one has ever doubted whether Max, is a worthy champion post-21, all of a sudden Max would come and he would snap the championship up from McLaren at the very last moment. Or the other alternative to the story is that Max would fall short and that there would be some kind of resolution around Lando being a worthy champion. These were all continuations of this story. That made sense. That was the story of Formula One as we were watching it. And then the year ended and Lando was on top. Oscar was in third. Max fell just short, but had an incredible run in the second half of the year. And that left us with a lot of places that story could go going into the next year. You ask yourself, okay, first and foremost, can the constructors fight each other again. You know, who will come out on top between McLaren and Red Bull? You ask yourself, okay, with Max Verstappen now again in a race-winning car, does that mean we're back to the status quo? Is it now Max who is going to be the title favorite again for 2026? More questions around McLaren. You know, Oscar kind of faltered in the latter half of 2025. Can he sort that out? Can he improve? You know, he's still very early in his Formula One career. There were many questions last year about Oscar's ceiling versus Lando's ceiling. These were big stories, you know, and this was the kind of thing that going into 2026, these were the questions that I wanted answered. But we didn't get any answers to those questions. The stories fell flat. Max Verstappen, Oscar Piastri, and Lando Norris are driving in cars which are nowhere near the front. It's not even close. They are so far behind Mercedes and Ferrari at this point that it's become extremely clear that for the year of 2026, neither of those three is really even going to be in a conversation for a potential championship. And I think that when you've spent several years watching new chapters in a story about the same couple of guys, all of the questions being about them, you know, when they're suddenly not in the story anymore, even though, you know, the characters are still there, they're still racing, they're still doing their thing, but in terms of the championship story, our characters have completely changed. And I think that makes it kind of feel weird, you know? It's kind of like watching a TV show that you really like, and then somewhere in like the second to last season, the lead actor decides to leave. And then it kind of goes to a whole bunch of different characters who may have been important in the previous season, but they weren't the leads, you know? They suddenly take on a leading role. Suddenly all the storylines are about them. And it's like we're looking at the same set pieces, we're looking at the same characters, but the show feels different. You know, it doesn't quite feel the same. And sometimes that works. Sometimes that works out pretty well and it takes you into interesting and new places. But sometimes it doesn't work either. And I think we're at this stage really early to figuring out exactly why this is the case. I also think that part of the problem has to do with who Mercedes is as a team. You know, if you think about who Formula One fans are right now in terms of the average age, the average Formula One fan, I think most Formula One fans are fans who have become fans of the sport within just the past few years. And if you think about it, when coming into the sport for the first time, no one ever starts rooting for the dominant team immediately. You know, that would be pretty lame to root for the dominant team. I think usually the team that you end up choosing as the team that you love in a sport will almost always be the team who was the underdog at the time that you started watching. And perhaps they could go on to become dominant, to become the winners later, and then it'll be a success of your team. But at the time that you start watching, they were the underdogs, and that's why you chose them, you know? And the point I'm trying to make in that regard is that all of the F1 fans who came in between the years of 2014 and 2021 would have been fans who experienced Mercedes dominance, you know? And I was one of these fans. I came in right at the end of that regulation era, and that was the moment that Max Verstappen was coming up and he was finally overthrowing this Lewis Hamilton Mercedes dynasty. So of course, coming into the sport, I was never going to be a Lewis Hamilton fan. I was always going to be a Max Verstappen fan. And it took me years worth of watching and really understanding the sport to kind of change my views and pick out drivers who I felt were ones I could relate to more and ones who I enjoyed more. If we've had years and years worth of Mercedes domination and you have new fans streaming in all the time, those fans are not going to be Mercedes fans. You know, it's just not going to happen. And what that means is that now that Mercedes has risen to the top again, they kind of don't have as many fans. It's just true. People don't like Mercedes in general as much as they like McLaren, who you know were the underdogs a few years ago, as much as they like Red Bull, who were the underdogs a few years before that. Mercedes just have not had enough time as underdogs to accumulate this large fan base. And I think that's completely okay. I don't think there's nothing wrong with Mercedes. Mercedes is a great team, great personnel, great drivers. And I think too, it might, in fact, with Kimi Antonelli coming into the fray, this might be starting to change because people love Kimi Antonelli. He's super relatable. He's this really young guy. So Mercedes will pick up fans, over the next while. Especially Antonelli will pick up fans. But I think that it just means that a Mercedes 1-2 podium right now doesn't feel as vibey as a Ferrari 1-2. Ferrari have been underdogs for pretty much my lifetime. Or a Red Bull 1-2 even. If Red Bull got a 1-2 right now, we'd all be, cheering for Hajar especially. Or a McLaren 1-2. All of the McLaren fans who've sort of come into the fray over the past few years would be celebrating that. So I think that's kind of part of the reason, why F1 doesn't really feel the same, is because these guys who we've been watching for all of these years, they're just not in the story right now. They're not in that championship story. And instead, the championship story is about people who we haven't really been actively rooting for as much. And that just makes it feel kind of weird, So I think in that case, time really is just all we need. It's just some time to let the new characters of the story start to feel familiar to us, to let the questions that this year's championship is creating, questions about, can anyone catch Mercedes? Questions about Kimi Antonelli, what's he capable of? Where is his ceiling? Questions of, is Ferrari able to finally give someone like Charles Leclerc or Lewis Hamilton, give them an opportunity to win races? These are the new questions. And I think over time, as we sit with these questions for a while, as they become more familiar to us, we will start to feel again like these are the stories we care about, Next up is kind of a small one. I feel that DRS created visual anticipation. And I'm talking specifically about overtaking right now. Something I noticed in the past couple of races. By the way, I really enjoyed the racing. I thought there was incredible racing, especially those Ferraris in China. That was like absolute cinema. But there was also something kind of weird about it. Sometimes you have a car that it's kind of like the overtake happens before you even know to wait for it. It's like the overtake happens so quickly and sort of so casually that it's surprising in some cases. And I think I read some people posting about artificial overtaking. They felt that it was artificial. Now, I definitely didn't feel like it was artificial. I feel like it was no more artificial than DRS was. And DRS has been around for as long as I've been watching Formula One. So I kind of felt like that was part and parcel of the sport. And with that said, love or hate DRS, I think DRS created something sort of accidentally, which has kind of become part of the feeling of Formula One. And that was visual anticipation. So what I'm talking about, you're watching a race, there's two cars, you're watching, and the chasing car is slowly closing the gap. And now we all did this, Last year, we're watching the race, we're watching that timer go down. 1.3 seconds, 1.250, 1.2, 1.150, 1.1, 1.0. And when it hits that 1 second mark, you're watching that car pull onto the straight, the wing pops open, And when that wing pops open, it's like this dopamine hit. It's like, oh, he's going to go for it now. Like he's in the hunt, like he's there. And especially with the dirty air, we knew how difficult it was just to follow within that 1 to 3 second range. So once he gets in that 1 second range, we're like, okay, this is on, the move is on potentially. Now, of course, there were DRS trains and all of that stuff that we've now hopefully will never see again. But I'm talking about when we have battles. The DRS created a very visual representation of the hunt. The hunt is happening now. And you know that because you can see the wings popped open. So now we don't have DRS anymore. Now, I don't think that's necessarily good or bad by itself. I think that the new cars, I'll talk about them in a second, but generally I'm feeling relatively positive about the new cars in some areas at least. And of course, it's very clear that these new cars can overtake. They can really overtake. They can overtake a lot. But I think that feeling of the hunter versus the hunted in a battle, which sounds kind of cringe, but I think that we've lost that. It's not there anymore. And Formula One is playing around with new graphics. I think maybe, is there a way that we can get kind of a visual representation of overtake mode being activated? It could be something on the timing tower. It could be like imagine you have all of their names, and then if a person gets within 1 second, it's like blue light or something behind their name. It's like, oh, energy activated, or whatever. Or it could be on the car as well. Like you have the big, what's it called? The the big hole above their head that the air goes into. I know the term for this. But anyway, you have the big hole. What if below the hole or around the hole, you had like a light that was like a blue? I don't know why I think the color of energy is blue in my head. And then we could watch, and the one car would come out onto the straight, and the other car would come out, and then they'd go, and then boop, blue light on, and we'd be like, he's on the hunt. He has the mode. He has the overtake or whatever. I think that would be pretty cool. I'm sure that there are like diehard F1 fans who are cringing, purists cringing and thinking, this is so gimmicky or whatever. I totally get that. I'm just trying to say, we had this visual anticipation thing. I liked it. I'm kind of thinking about how can we bring that back in a way that works with the new regulations. I don't know. Give me your ideas if you have any. But anyway, let's talk about the new regulations. So as I said a moment ago, I'm actually pretty positive about these new regulations. I like them. I mean, say what you will, I like them, okay? Now, I don't like all of them, so don't come for me. I know it's very popular right now to hate the new regulations, and I totally understand why. I understand all of the criticisms. The engine noise is just simply not good enough. I also understand from a perspective of the fuels. There's an argument for biofuels. We've been saying we can now create eco-friendly fuels. So why don't we just go back to V8s, V10s, which I completely understand as well. The argument from the other side is kind of that big car manufacturers, they take part in Formula One, not only because it's profitable, but also because it's an upstream pipeline for which new technological breakthroughs will then eventually get into their road cars. So with that said, I don't know if I know Mohammed bin Sulayem has said a thing or two about ICE engines again. It's possible that we might see something like that, and I'm all for it. But I also think it's probably more likely that this electric thing is here to stay because that's the way that the world is going in terms of road cars. Then another thing, and this is where I really, really am on the side of people who don't like the regulations, is qualifying. Qualifying is trash. Qualifying is poopy right now. It's really, really bad. Now, for the upcoming race in Suzuka, they've already, issued something saying that they're going to drop the total amount of battery from 9 joules to 8 joules, which hopefully will improve things, I think. I guess we'll see how it actually ends up affecting qualifying. I'm optimistic, at least, but for right now, the qualifying that we have seen thus far in 26 has just been rubbish. Terrible. Not only do I not like the fact that there is super clipping, like that's one thing. The fact that there is super clipping in qualifying is terrible. We're supposed to, in qualifying, see the cars at their absolute peak, pushing as much as possible. But I also really don't like that they hid it. Like, I don't like the hiding of it, even more than I don't like the super clipping. That, for me, is the worst part of all. If you don't know what I'm talking about, in the previous couple of qualifying sessions, they would actually intentionally cut away the camera. So they did 3 things that were kind of deceitful. Number 1, if they were doing a POV shot of a car doing a qualifying lap, they would follow it on the straight, as they always have. And the moment that super clipping is like about to start, the second that the battery runs out, they'll switch to a outside camera angle so that you can't notice in the car decelerating, which I think is just really scummy. Then in addition, and these are even worse because this is just lying. This is just straight up lying. They cut out the audio of cars super clipping. So they would essentially just insert fake audio. You'd have cars going down the straight And the second they started super clipping, it makes a really clear audio change, and they just removed it. They played with the audio, they manipulated it to make it seem like the super clipping wasn't happening, which is ridiculous because we all know that it's happening. There's no Formula One fan who didn't notice that it's happening. And then the worst one, and I mean, you must know about this one because I've seen everything about it on social media, is how they would have, so you know how in the olden days, in 2025, they'd have this number of like, oh, this is the speed the car is going. And we get on the straight and goes, okay, 150 kilometers, 175, 200, and it's climbing. And it would get up to a peak and we'd all go, whoa, that's really fast. And then they'd brake and it would come down so quickly, and it was cool. It was like a visual spectacle. Now they have it go. And when it gets to the top, it just stays at the top. And they're kind of arguing like, oh yeah, we're just showing how fast the car goes. That's the top speed. Bull, nonsense. You just don't want us to you don't want us to know or to think about the fact that the speed that you're showing is only halfway down the straight and not all the way down the straight. So yeah, qualifying sucks. Qualifying needs to go. I mean, no, I love qualifying, but qualifying needs to be better. They need to get it back to the way it was. Last year, qualifying was electric. It was incredible. It was like some weekends qualifying was the best part of the whole weekend. I'm not saying I want that to come back, but I am saying qualifying should be great again. So yeah, we'll see if this Japan change that they're making to the power units or the regulation of the power units, if that makes any difference. I'm optimistic. I hope so. I already think that China's qualifying was marginally better than Australia, so we'll see whether that continues to be a trend. Teams will also learn and become better at managing the battery over the course of a half lap. So hopefully super clipping will soon be a thing of the past. But yes, outside of that, I'm pretty happy with the racing we've had. I thought that the racing in China was incredible. I really, really, really enjoyed it. I don't mind too much. I know it kind of seems gimmicky that it's like we're putting a system in place to allow a slower car to keep up with a faster car and potentially even overtake a faster car. But DRS did that. DRS, it was like, how many times did we see that last year? Like, just try and stay within his DRS for as long as you can, because it's this artificial thing helping you coast along a little bit quicker than you would otherwise. We saw teammates using it to help their teammates. We saw Carlos Sainz using it in that brilliant way that one time in Singapore. So these are just, it's ingenuity. It looks a little bit different than what we liked and what we thought ingenuity looked like last year. But I still think it's cool. I enjoyed the racing a lot, and I hope we do see racing where we have fighting for the lead a lot, often. I don't want it to be too easy. There's I had an argument with some friends about this because they really don't like the new regulations. They say, and these guys have been watching F1 for a lot longer than me, they don't like it. And I kind of said to them, I agree that it's not perfect. I totally agree with you on that. It's not perfect. It's a little bit too easy to overtake right now. But can we at least agree that it's better than the dirty air situation? Like, wouldn't we rather have too many overtakes and then sort of move back than have almost no overtakes at all and be pulling our hair out every weekend trying to figure out ways to just have more overtakes? I mean, we need to not have rose-colored glasses and pretend that last year we didn't have so many races where the race was over by lap 1. It's true. It just happened. And this is better than that. I do think that this is better than that. Is it perfect? No. We have some work to do still. But I'm liking it so far. I'm an optimist. So let me know what you think. I'm happy to be back, and I will see you for some technical analysis in the next one. Cheers.